Toucan Play That Game is proudly sponsored by NiceGameShop.com, the place to go for rare and unusual Asian games. Hi, I'm Michael. Take a seat and I'll tell you about Oh My Goods by Mayfair Games. This is an economic game whereby we're craftsmen, trading goods, building up goods to build engines in order to win. The way this works is we start each round, everyone draws 2 cards simultaneously, adding them to their hand. And these cards are multi-use. They act both as the goods when they're on a building and also as resources in your hand. And you can build them as new buildings that will get you victory points and give you other resources that you can build in order to contribute to other buildings. After drawing 2 cards, you then reveal the trade row, and you keep revealing cards until you reveal 2 half suns, at which point you stop. So you could have as few as 2 cards, and you could have any number of cards if you just don't get a sun come out. Once the second suns come out, you stop. Each player will then look at what's there and see, can I use those goods to power the building that I have and want to power? They'll then assign their worker, and they choose whether their worker is efficient or inefficient. If they're efficient, they need all the resources, but they'll produce 2 goods on the building. If they're inefficient, they need 1 less of the resources that the building would require, but they get to only produce 1 good. So you've got to very much gauge whether or not you're going to be able to fulfill the requirements for the building. And you will be able to use the resources from your hand as well as those from the trade row. And the ones that are in the trade row don't get used up when you use them. So every player can use those. Once everyone's done this, they'll then also decide if they're going to try and build a building this turn. If they are, they put it face down in front of them. And the cost of the buildings is in the top left here. And players will need to give up a number of goods equal to that value. But I'll come to that in a moment, because first we reveal another trade row. And again, we stop revealing cards as soon as we find 2 suns. So this could be a short row, it could be a long row, which means there's a lot of variation in whether or not you're going to be able to. And there's a lot of gauging, is what you need already there, or do you kind of take the gamble, or do you go, well, I'm only missing 1 resource, so I'll go inefficient, or do you go, I'm only missing 1 resource, I'll take the gamble that it's going to come out in this second row. Because it's now that you're starting with your first player fulfill the requirements for their building. You produce. So if they have the resources they need, they produce, and they gain cards from the deck face down on that building. So your char burner, they're only worth 1, and everyone has a slightly different char burner. So that creates a kind of asymmetry to the game that works very nicely and means everyone isn't after all the same things. But it can mean it's really handy if you hoard the things you know other people are after in your hand, because there's no hand limit. So if you're hoarding those cards, they can't get them. They're not going to have those resources coming out. They're not going to be able to trigger their building. So that's one interesting little kind of tactic you can employ in this game. Then once you've gone around all the players doing this, and at the same time they'll be able to spend their gold to build buildings if they have, or instead of building a building, they could get an apprentice, but they have to have the corresponding buildings that the apprentice requires you to have already built. The apprentice and the buildings are going to give you endgame points. These are the only way you're going to get endgame points other than goods at the end of the game. Goods equal to 5 value will get you 1 point. So the majority of your points is going to come from buildings. You might have a few apprentices, and the game will end once 1 player has built their 8th building. So that is the game. What do I think of it? I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic game. With regards to the artwork and components, all there is the cards, which are kind of okay quality, but the art on these cards is lovely. I really like the art on the cards. I'm a big fan of multi-use cards in games, And this does it very well with them being resources and buildings. And so the more you build buildings of a certain type, which tend to need the same resource, the harder it's going to be for you to get those resources. So you've got to be very aware of what's going on with regards to building up engines. You're going to be building similar cards from that respect. And the game kind of escalates quite slowly with regards to the engine building. And it only really works if you get the cards you need to get the money in. So it can be quite slow in the first few rounds, and then it starts to speed up as people get more and more money each round coming in. I very much enjoy this. It's a very light game. It's quite easy to teach. It's slightly confusing for people, the multi-use cards. I found who are not used to multi-use cards in games, they found it a bit confusing. For me personally, I found it very intuitive. I think all the graphic design and the iconography has been very clear. Yeah, absolutely love this. I think it scales beautifully for the player numbers because of the majority of the decision making really happens at the same time. Once that trade row has been done, everyone is sat there making the decisions. So the round is only ever as quick as your slowest player. So unless the extra player you're adding in is particularly slow, adding in more players doesn't really affect the game that much, except for there's fewer resources out and about, and it's easier for resources to get caught up in people's hands and not out on the table for you to be able to utilize. There's a lot of different strategies you can employ in trying to win this. You can get lots of like apprentices and go that route. You could just build buildings. The type of buildings you build, you know, you can get these black ones that give you special powers. You can go for those or avoid those, and there's little techniques, and there's just lots of little kind of delicacies, little intricacies with this game that you don't really pick up on your first play, or maybe even your first couple of plays, but after a few plays in, you get more used to the fact that there are these different tactics, these little things you can do to assess and adjust the game and interact with the other players in a not necessarily direct way, but indirect way. I think this is a fantastic game. It's quick, it's easy to play. The actual size of it, it's a tiny little box, but it feels like a big box game. You don't come out of this feeling like, and what's next? That was a nice little taster. It feels like great fun. I absolutely love it. That's Oh My Goods by Mayfair Games. I do hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you have, please do check out the rest of the videos on the channel, as well as subscribing and sharing. And as always, thanks for watching, and bye for now.